Coming on stage are the distinguished panelists for this last session. What role will technology play in reshaping Asia? We have Mr. Ashar Aziz, Mr. Pramod Haque, Mr. Peter Ho, Mr. Me Air Purifier, and Mr. Narayana Murthy. And the moderator for this session is Mr. Koh Boon Hwee.
Good afternoon to everyone. And my fellow panelists and I are well aware of the fact that we are taking this session, we are sitting between you and the rest of the long weekend. But this is a panel with a difference because almost nobody here is a politician. But it seems like even before the technology panel starts that, intelligent machines and robots have already gotten a bad rap. There's no one here to defend them except for my fellow panelists. But I think there is no question about the fact that technology impacts everyone. I'm very certain that everyone in the room here has a cellular phone or a smartphone, and that in the last 20 years, it has become an indispensable part of everybody. No one actually leaves home without it. And so technology basically is reshaping the world. I think, and I do not just mean business, because in the Philippines, for example, in 2001, during the protest that unseated President Estrada, it was popularly believed that SMS over the mobile network was responsible for marshalling the large numbers of protesters that turned up. More recently in Hong Kong, still fresh in our memories, the student protesters made use of a mesh network to communicate, bypassing even the cellular network. And I think we all know, and there have been some comments about it in the earlier sessions, about the anonymity of the internet that allows a small number to generate a loud impact, sometimes without basis for the allegations that are being made. Yet the technology also allows government or those in authority to reach out to large numbers of people directly, much like the advent of television allowed politicians into everyone's living room. So the key question is how governance and social institutions can adapt to this world. But with the rise of technology, other problems come about. Not a single day goes by without discussions about cybercrime. And it is not just an issue of potential identity theft, but real losses in economic terms. How society responds to this new form of criminal activity, cyberbullying, cyberterrorism, I think is a challenge for us going forward. Economically, many industries are already in the throes of dealing with severe disruption. Old examples, for example, what Search and Craigslist have done to directories. But more recently, if you look at what WeChat and WhatsApp and the impact they've had on traditional telcos, or what Lyft and Uber are doing to the transportation industry, these are all things that businesses are going to have to contend with. Even in traditional industries, the advance of technology is making things possible today or in the near future that will cause severe disruption. There's been a lot of discussion, for example, about manufacturing 4.0, and this has been discussed a little bit earlier because the advance of robots and sensors, their prices are declining very rapidly. What we see, for example, is the trend that drives manufacturing back into the large markets. The pursuit of cheap labor across the globe, I think, is an economic model that has come to an end. And yet, it is fraught with challenges, as has been pointed out just in DPM Taman's session, that you've got industrial jobs that will continue to be, or rather industrial enterprises that will be continuing to be increasingly productive, but without creating any of the jobs that we have come to depend on. And almost all of the jobs that are being created today are service jobs with relatively lower levels of pay. So while I personally believe that everyone has benefited from the advance of technology, there are challenges ahead. And as has been pointed out, we are increasingly seeing a world divided between those who are tech savvy and who can understand technology and those who are not. And this has given rise to an increasing level of inequality in income that society will also have to deal with. So my fellow panelists are going to comment on many aspects of this, and I'd like to ask Peter Ho to start with his comments on government and society.
Well, thank you, Boon Hwee. I'm very conscious that this is a huge subject and could possibly form the basis of an entire Singapore forum, or maybe more than that. Now, I'm only going to try to touch on a few aspects of this subject. But first, let me say, I think the machines are coming, as DPM Tharman said. But arguably, technology has been a force for good. And in the developing parts of the world, it has helped to uplift the lives of millions of people. Mobile telephones, for example, bypass the needs for costly, infrastructure-intensive fixed-line telephones in countries like China, India, Indonesia, and in doing so, connected millions, if not billions, of citizens on a massive basis. And today, hundreds of millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, of motivated students from around the world can now access, through the internet, massively online open courses, or MOOCs, taught by top professors. And this means more paths to success, more opportunities for hungry and ambitious young people from the developing world, especially in Asia. But pervasive and globalized technologies like the internet and applications like the social media challenge traditional notions of governance and are altering the status quo in politics, in society, and in the economy. Through the internet and the social media, ordinary citizens are given a voice and an influence that they have never had before. I think Boon Hwee mentioned the uprisings in Philippines against President Estrada, and in what happened in Hong Kong, other parts of the world, anywhere where there's some kind of open communication system, you have this challenge. But at the same time, authorities have also had to deal with flash mobs which are mobilized through the social media, and the policies and actions of governments are today put under the microscope of massive public scrutiny. You know, the proliferation of smartphones and the social media is turning the watched into the watchers. So sins of commission, sins of omission are now routinely outed online by citizen vigilantes. And the result is suspicion of the elites of governments, leading to pressure for devolution of power and for governments to become less hierarchical and more connected. And this trend introduces new opportunities as well as risks for governments. Collective action can be a powerful force for good if responsible citizens exploit it to create public value while removing the need for direct government intervention. Now, citizen journalism encourages action by the public and by the government. And in Singapore, just not too long ago, there was a video showing a tourist, actually from Vietnam, at a mobile phone shop, begging for his money to be returned back to him. And this was sent by a citizen journalist to a website called Stomp. And it went viral, sparked massive public indignation, and it led to a crowdfunding campaign that raised more than $12,000 to help the tourists. But at the same time, it prompted the authorities here to act against some shops in the mall, as well as to enhance the Consumer Protection Fair Trading Act. So this is one example of what citizen journalism can do, empowered through the social media. Now, last year, Xiaomi, the world's third largest smartphone maker, released the Me Air Purifier, which sends pollution readings to mobile phones to alert users of high levels of contaminants in the atmosphere. What did this mean? This meant giving the man in the street information about the conditions in the air. And this gives them a power which they didn't have before to demand and put pressure on the government for action. Of course, we know that there are other instances of collective action that can be more pernicious. Certainly the use of social media to promote extremist ideologies and to recruit terrorists. This contributing to the globalization of sectarian conflict, as DPM Taman put it just now. Now, technology is also altering society. We are becoming more dependent on and even addicted to technology. So we have the so-called crackberry addicts, who show withdrawal symptoms of drug addicts when their Blackberries or other smartphones break down. Technology is also making decisions for us. For example, through sophisticated algorithms, we receive real-time feedback on what is best for us. Now, at first blush, this sounds great. We are lazy, so let the smartphone do the thinking for us. But if we begin to rely more and more on such algorithms, will our decisions come to be based less on our judgment, on our intuition, and more on algorithms and data analytics that may model worlds different from our own sense of reality? Is this good or is this bad? How will we safeguard the instincts that help us to survive? How will hard-fought-for values such as tolerance, individuality, and freedom of choice evolve? What will being a human mean in future? In a 24/7 online world, constantly surrounded by innumerable sensors and smart objects, all connected to the Internet of Things as they describe it today, what does privacy mean? If the clothes people wear, devices inside their bodies, and furnitures are all smart, online and connected, how will privacy be defined? As smart objects seek to gather more contextual information on behavior and actions, the ability for smart devices to analyze people's lives and discover their identities will challenge traditional notions of privacy. Last year, Apple became the world's largest company, on trajectory to become the world's first trillion-dollar company by market cap. It's mind-boggling. Technology like firms like Apple, Google, Facebook dominate the global economy. And so this is putting a lot of power into the hands of a few companies. So we are seeing the rise of the 1%, which DPM spoke about. Now, what happens to the broader base of middle-class people everywhere? How do governments confront such emerging challenges? Today, tech companies are so big that their top executives are discovering they can use their considerable influence to promote a cause and demand political reform, challenging again the traditional notions of government and governance.
Peter,
so some companies have threatened to cancel
Peter,
travel,
to come to the conclusion.
reduce investments, relocate employees, remove millions of dollars from the economies of states, passing laws they disagree with. So, just to sum up, there can be no absolutes. It's imperative that we confront these challenges to find a middle and pragmatic ground on technology that addresses the concerns of society and meets the needs of economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Dr. Ma Wei Hua now to comment on the impact of technology on economics and on China. Dr. Ma is going to be speaking in Mandarin. So for those of you who would be more comfortable in English, please put on your translators.
好，谢谢。这个科技的这个进步，的确给这个人们的生产方式、生活方式，特别是政府的管理，都带来很多的前所未有的挑战。但是我觉得，这个在重塑亚洲的过程中，我觉得最重要的着眼点，还应当看到科技技术的发展对经济的重大作用。我们回顾这个人类经济的发展历史，几乎每一个重大的科技革命，都会带来经济的前所未有的发展。从蒸汽机到电到现在的互联网，每一次大的经济危机，要想真正的复苏走出困境，也都依赖于重大的科学技术的进步。所以，这个我们现在谈到重塑亚洲我觉得科技它会发挥这个非常重要的作用。那么对于中国来说，同样如此。这个大家听到比较多的一个词儿叫中国经济的新常态。我觉得这个中国的经济的新常态很大的意义就是靠这个科技创新来改变中国经济的旧常态。这个新常态我的理解有一个是中国的经济从过去高速增长要变成中高速增长，10%变成7%左右。但是更重要的是经济结构的优化，就是要调整存量，优化增量。也就是说，这个 GDP 它不仅一个高速增长的数量概念，很重要的一点就是它要有它的质量。一个国家的 GDP 要想有竞争力，就是一定它有技术含量。我记得尚德曼总理、副总理这个几年前在通商中国的论坛上，他讲过这样一句话，他说：“你中国过去30多年高速增长，确实令世界瞩目。”他说：“但是挑战不大，为什么？你是低端制造业，你的优势会转瞬即逝。”我前天跟尚德曼副总理讨论这个问题，我说：“你很有远见，中国现在过去的人口红利这种低端制造业的优势没有了。”所以中国必须的转换经济增长的动力，从过去投资驱动，靠人口红利的出口驱动，必须转向到靠科技创新来带动中国经济的发展。这个大的世界经济的背景，全球经济还在深度调整，复苏不振，特别是各国的经济出现分化。全球的治理结构进展也比较慢，但是有一点就是全球这个科技的创新在全球领域应该成为新的一种驱动力我们看到全要素的这种结构发生了新的变化，就是劳动力和资本对经济增长的贡献力实际在下降而技术进步的贡献力在上升，无论是我们现在的互联网、大数据还是新能源、生物医药，还是德国的工业4.0和中国的互联网+这些都孕育着新的技术突破也非常有希望催生新的经济增长点所以在这种情况下，中国的变应该和世界的变同步所以中国的新常态就适应了这种世界科技创新的这种趋势。从中国国内的情况看，过去劳动力的成本低 这是最大的优势。那个时候，只要引进技术和管理，就迅速会变成生产力，啊。但是现在中国人口的老龄化啊，也在越来越严重啊，农村的劳动力越来越紧缺啊。中国已经这个经历了刘易斯拐点啊，劳动力紧缺已经成为一种常态啊。所以这种情况下，要素的规模驱动这个力量在减弱啊。经济增长必须从过去的数量型变成质量型。那么，就必须从过去无限的投入低成本的劳动力，得向提高人口人力资源的质量向这个方面转变。同时，也必须从过去更多的依靠劳动资本的大量投入来推动经济增长，而转向更多的依靠科技创新。我觉得中国的这个科技创新这2年还应该有很大的变化虽然中国经济总的速度放缓了，但是从去年到现在，我们看到统计数字表明，就是科技含量比较高的这种 GDP 的成分，要超过它的增长速度，要超过一般的 GDP 的增长速度。中国出口的质量这个结构也在发生变化，高技术的机电产品已经超过了一般的产品的出口的数量。特别是这几年，中国加大了对科研这个方面的投入。长期以来，这个 GDP 占科研一个国家科研占 GDP 的比重，过去中国是1点几，现在已经提到2点几。衡量一个国家 GDP 的质量3个指标 ：GDP 的技术含量，这个 GDP 的这个科研占的比重。科研投入的比重，第2个是科技成果的转化率，第3个 GDP 技术进步对 GDP 的贡献率。但后2者中国还是比较低的。那么，中国这个对科技这个通过科技来提高 GDP 的这样的一些措施是2个引擎的，一个是对这个重大的前沿性的基础性的关系国计民生的重大科技项目，这是国家要组织力量去突破。当然，国家要靠科技革命科技改革、科技体制的改革，特别是越来越重视科技人员的作用，对他们激励的作用，越来越重视企业科研的投入。这方面中国也有很多突破但是我觉得这个中国这个更重视的是对大量的成长型的、创新型的中小企业这方面的支持特别是这次李克强提出这个叫做大众创业、万众创新因为中国现在劳动人口有将近9亿人。如果这个9亿劳动人口都能投入创新创业的这样的热潮，那么中国就充满了活力在美国的90年代的创新中，也60%的成果是中小企业创造那么在中国这个目前66%的专利发明，74%的技术创新和82%的新产品，实际上都是由创新型的中小企业贡献的
Dr. Ma must ask you to conclude.
所以这个对中小企业这方面中国重视非常非常重视。而中小企业大家知道，像阿里巴巴原来是个50万起家的中小企业，成为全球第1个 IPO。腾讯在深圳是一个没有名的小企业，现在全世界都在用微信。但是科技的小企业的成长最大的困难是金融的支持。那么中国现在在深入金融改革，特别是要发展这个直接融资多层次的资本市场这样中国的中小企业在科技中的贡献加大，中国的 GDP 的技术含量就会增加，中国的经济竞争力也会增加。谢谢。
Thank you very much, Dr. Ma. We'll make a transition now to Mr. Murthy, who's going to comment on the impact of the technologies on what I would call traditional businesses.
Thank you, Boon Hwee. First of all, my condolences to all Singaporeans and the well-wishers of Singapore on the demise of Lee Kuan Yew, one of the finest leaders of the last 200 years. For us in the business, changes in technology are nothing new. Whether it was the introduction of locomotives immediately after the Industrial Revolution, whether the introduction of aviation technology, telephone technology, semiconductor technology, or even to some extent internet, businesses have handled these changes, derived tremendous benefit from them. However, this time it is something truly extraordinary, thanks to reduction in cost, thanks to greater and greater miniaturization, thanks to increasing computing power, thanks to increasing bandwidth, reduction of bandwidth, as well as thanks to improvements in sensor technology. We now have a paradigm where we can leverage the power of ubiquitous computing, thanks to, of course, all these plus wireless, to make life for human beings so much better and for corporations to leverage the opportunities by this. There's clearly one major paradigm for us, and that is leveraging the power of software and the power of sensor technology. That's the name of the game. There are many, many examples. For example, Toyota has come out with the connected car, which will, at the push of a button, tell you whether you're running out of fuel. If you are in that danger, then it will show you how to get to the nearest gas station. It will use your electronic wallet to pay for that and manage your thing. Look at the power of software that has come out, as well as the Internet of Things, in Tesla's new car, as well as in Google's driverless car. In the case of Tesla car, software is downloaded to all the cars in the night for any improvement. There is no need for recall because most of the power comes from the power of software. Second, GE has leveraged the power of Internet of Things and software to improve its locomotives, to do a lot of analytics, and then warn the drivers of any impending disasters, and in fact even schedule alternate vehicles, etc., etc. Roche has used the power of SMAC, that social media, analytics, and cloud computing, to, and of course the fitness technology, to bring better value to diabetic patients. Look at what Uber has done. Uber has created a new revolution in transportation industry, thanks to the power of mobile computing, wireless, etc. Look at what Netflix has done. Netflix has created an entirely new industry in some sense, has challenged the traditional players in media once again because of the power of internet and Internet of Things and software. Look at what Amazon has done. It has provided you the facility, the comfort of getting you whatever you want from the Amazon shop at your place in a very comfortable way. So therefore, there is a lot of work that is going on in the industry to adapt. What are the things that we need to do? I think the industry has to first look at the ability to learn quickly. In other words, learnability of our employees is extremely important. Second, leveraging new technology with its existing technology. For example, my own Infosys has been doing that to connect social media with back-end engines like SAP and Oracle, etc. Third, invest more and more in R&D. Fourth, have courage to accept the reality and leverage that change for your benefit. I would say that if businesses do this, I have no doubt at all that, like they have done in the past, even this change too will become a huge opportunity for the benefit of companies and, of course, for the benefit of the consumers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murthy. We'll now move on to Mr. Aziz. And I think I
have a few slides, so if I can
please go
get
ahead.
them on the screen, that would be awesome. Great. Good afternoon, everybody. And that was a great presentation earlier about the promise of technology. I have a slightly different topic right now, which is the perils posed by technology. Technology, of course, is a double-edged sword. And it cuts for good, and it cuts for evil as well. A long time ago, we had gold coins and treasures, and we had thieves who wanted them. As these instruments have become digitized, the same thieves have moved into cyberspace. And cybercrime is at pandemic levels these days. Ever since the dawn of organized society, we've had spies amongst city-states, nation-states, all sorts of espionage to figure out what the other side, the enemy, was working on. And as sensitive information has moved into cyberspace, espionage has become cyber espionage. As countries as a whole become highly reliant on their digitally controlled infrastructures, such as power grids, telecommunication networks, financial networks, warfare is acquiring a cyber dimension, such that strikes on these critical infrastructures can have national, if not global, implications. So as we embrace the promise of technology, we have to be mindful of the risks in cyberspace as well. We hear about attacks virtually every week, if not several times a week. Since I went on my trip, we heard about the attack on the White House, the cyber attack that was just a few days ago. Before that, we heard about Sony. And the list is endless in just the last few months. So the industry has been spending billions of dollars on trying to secure their infrastructure with products like firewalls and antivirus systems and many other such systems, but they are failing to stay protected in today's advanced threat landscape. So both the technology, the defensive technology, has fallen behind the offensive technology. So also have the regulations that require a certain level of defensive infrastructure fallen behind. So Target was breached, and 75 million credit cards were stolen. But Target had passed PCI compliance 1 month before that. In fact, they were under PCI audit. At the same time, criminals were running off with millions of credit cards, and they passed the audit because they had this architecture, and this architecture is broken. The auditors came and said, "You have antivirus running?" "Yep." "Firewalls running?" "Yep." "You look good to me." Meanwhile, the criminals were sitting inside their network. It's not just Target that has got a problem in this. Pretty much every player is at risk. And when we have gone in there and done a breach response. And we were involved in pretty much every breach response that you've heard of in the last year. And we have done an average of how long the attacker was in that network before discovery. That was 229 days on average. That's well over half a year. A sophisticated attacker can be in and out of your network with the data in less than 15 minutes. So for half a year, the attacker to be sitting in there is a very significant compromise. We've heard about attacks in Europe, in the United States. So the question about technology in Asia would be, what's happening in Asia? And the answer is pretty much the same thing. Asia is not just equally vulnerable because it runs the same kind of software, the same kind of security systems, but it's subject to the same kind of attacks. So on average, this is the incident rate of sophisticated cyber attacks. And I say sophisticated cyber attacks, I don't mean cyber criminals. I mean nation states. These are nation state level attacks, what we also call advanced persistent threat or APT level attacks. So if you look at this from 60% to 23%, there's nothing that says 0%. And well over 90% of the organizations have some form of cyber criminal activity, even if it's not emanating from a nation state. And you can see that North Asia is running hotter than South Asia for the simple reason that cyber attacks follow wherever the conflict is the hottest. Whatever conflict we have in physical space tends to spill over into cyberspace. That is the current norm. No surprise, government is the biggest targeted victim vertical, followed by telecom because it's the digital nervous system, followed by financial services. The big four, no surprise, equal opportunity disclosure if you recognize these flags. These are some of the well-known, well-funded, sophisticated nation-state threat actors. And I have not omitted anyone because my company happens to be based in one of those countries. And they have very, very significant capabilities in offensive activities in cyberspace. So clearly, cybersecurity is not just an organizational issue, it's a national security issue. And what can we be thinking about as we think about strengthening not just organizational or enterprise level defense, but also national defense? So the government's role is really to think about what are the best policies to promote. And the first policy I think makes sense is to invest in training people in cybersecurity. I've gone to pretty much every corner in the world and found that there's an extreme dearth of skill set and trained people. So we were talking about the automation of jobs. Well, there is no automation of this very difficult to do job. We need to make threat-aware recommendations. These recommendations need to be aware. That means the regulators need to be aware of how attacks work. Too many regulators don't know how attacks work, so they rely on the old form, the old school of recommendation. Do some form of authentication, do some form of encryption. You'll be good. That's not sufficient in today's threat landscape. Threat intelligence sharing between the governments and the private sector. We talked about collaboration between government and private sector. This is one robust area of collaboration for the simple reason that the government doesn't own or control the assets that are the critical infrastructure of that country. They're typically in the private sector, and if they are wanting to be responsible for the security, they should be doing real-time sharing of that. And this, by the way, is something that President Obama just signed via executive order in the United States because he couldn't get Congress to agree on this, so he did an executive order to mandate exactly that. And lastly, because the technology is failing all across the board, we need to review the technology recommendations in light of modern threats. So that's a quick summary of my view on cybersecurity, and thank you all.
Thank you very much, Ashar. And for those of you who are in companies, I think Ashar didn't mention it, and who might think that this is nation versus nation. He had another little statistic that should sort of make all of us wake up. 97% of all corporations have been penetrated. Most of them don't know it. So we're not talking about a small number, it's 97%. I'm
That is
correct,
exactly right.
Yes. So let me now move on to someone who can not only comment about all of the technologies and the disruptions that are occurring today, but has a unique position in Silicon Valley of seeing what's coming down the road. So if you think the disruption today is momentous, I think Pramod's going to scare all of us.
No. Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. So I'm going to give you a slightly different perspective, almost like what Ashar did from what else has been going on. And the perspective here is of what's happening when it comes to innovation and entrepreneurship, and especially as it's happening in California, because that's where I reside. Originally from India, but I've been in the US since '72, and spending a lot of time over the last 25 years looking at new technologies, innovation, funding companies, sometimes right, sometimes wrong, and so on and so forth. One of the companies that we funded was Ashar's company back in 2004. When it was Ashar and I think 5 or 6 engineers with an idea. He came and he saw the future, and he said, listen, this is going to become a problem, and we think it's worthwhile funding this company. And we funded his company, another friend of mine, another venture capitalist, and we paid $7 million for his company. 10 years later, his company is worth $7 billion. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. One of the things that, some of the speakers earlier talked about is this whole issue of entrepreneurial spirit. And, that's one of the things we love about Silicon Valley. There is a lot of entrepreneurial spirit there. And one of the things that was mentioned by one of the speakers earlier in one of the panels was that, the entrepreneurial spirit is agnostic to ethnicity, agnostic to religion, it's agnostic to politics. Silicon Valley is very unique in that sense. People from different parts of the world, different ethnicity, different religions, and different political viewpoints come together and fund companies and work together and make innovation happen and transform society in a very interesting way. I'll also touch a little bit on innovation as it relates to India and China as well, because my firm invests not just in the US, but we also invest in India and China. And we find both those nations very interesting places to invest, because innovation is happening everywhere. It's happening in different places at different paces for different reasons. And so let me sort of explain that and give you a big perspective first. So, if you look at what's happening in the US, and the speaker earlier, in fact, Mr. Murthy talked about how, all kinds of interesting things are happening when it comes to the IoT, that, Internet of Things now, the wellness devices. He talked about what happened with Netflix, we talked about what happened with Amazon. The standard of living really does go up when innovation happens. You look at what people used to do before a lot of these technologies got invented and put into practice, and what people are able to do today, it is very fair to say that the standard of living of people has gone up, right? And that's true, not just in the US, but it's also true in places like China and India and so on. And so we do a lot of investments in what we call the e-commerce space, the computer internet space, e-commerce. And, Amazons and so on and so forth, you're obviously seeing, what's happening in China with Alibaba, and you're seeing what's happening in India now with companies like Flipkart and so on and so forth, Snapdeal and so on. Changing the landscape, very, very interesting things happening. Now, what about, products and services? Now, if you step back and sort of look at the positioning, the relative positioning, and maybe go back about 5 years, right? 2010, 5 years ago. If you look at the relative positioning of what the strength of each of these countries were a lot of innovation happening in the US. And then what was happening was a lot of the services sector in the IT was being done in India, right? A lot of services companies, the Infosys, the Wipros, the TCS, and so on and so forth. A lot of tech services, not just call centers, but a lot of tech services. And China, obviously very well known for manufacturing. Tons of millions and billions of dollars worth of goods being transported out of China into US, into Europe, and so on and so forth, right? Now, one of the things that's happening is, a question you ask, and we ask ourselves as we look at investment opportunities in India and China is, well, why aren't we investing or why aren't we finding product companies, companies that are building new kinds of software, new kinds of products in India and China? And, one of the things that we've learned over the years is that by and large, the early adopters of technology are still in the US. Not even Europe, right? It's really the US where technology first comes to bear and gets used. That's where the early adopters are. And there's a reason for that, and I'll get into that a little later. And then over a period of time, obviously those technologies come into other countries as well. And so, when it comes to products, the innovation really happens in the US. When you look at services in the e-commerce space, the Amazons, the Googles, the Facebooks, they all start in the US. A few years later, those things are replicated in China by the Alibabas and Tencents and so on. And then a few years later, they're replicated in India, which is, a very large global economy, lots of people. A few years later, they show up in India. Now, what about products, right? And so that is something that we talk about. And what we're starting to see now are some very interesting trends. Because at the end of the day, innovation, if it's really going to be successful, it has to be financially sustainable. It has to make sense financially, otherwise it's not going to happen, right? It might happen a little bit, but then it fades out. So what's starting to happen now, and we're seeing this in India right now, as wages keep going up, as you know, the growth rate in both China and India is higher, so are the inflation rates. They're higher than what it is in the US. What we're starting to see is, companies like Wipro and Infosys and TCS and so on, we're starting to see a lot of these companies, their wage inflations are high because they got to sustain their employees and so on and so forth, keep them, retain them. What you're finding is that, it's putting pressure on their corporate profits because their rate of, the CPI index in the US is not 7, 8%, 10% per year. And so your existing client is not going to increase your contract at the rate of 10% every year on an existing contract. And so, what we're starting to see now are product companies getting created in India that are focused on automating the back end. These are now software companies that are building software that will automate the back end function so that you don't need as many people, so that you get more productivity gains out of your existing people as they use software tools to do the same thing that they used to do before. So when you had 5 people doing something before, you can do that with 3 people or 2 people today. Now it creates all kinds of issues, I know, with the whole issue of employment and so on and so forth, employment rates and so on, but that's what's happening. We're starting to see the same thing in China now. We're starting to see some very interesting companies getting created in the semiconductor space. I'm an investor in one of them. We work with SMIC, and we're putting together some very, very interesting things and processes in place that we believe are going to be very advantageous and allow China to be very competitive with other companies in the US and so on. So we're starting to see innovation spread, not just based in the US, even though that is where most of the innovation, early innovation takes place, but then some of that localized innovation is starting to happen for different reasons in India and China, and our firm continues to invest in those kinds of technologies and so on. I think, as was said earlier, there are some issues that do come up in that you think about what does this do to someone that is not highly educated, and how is it affecting the lower income folks or the middle income folks, people that don't have a lot of talent and so on and so forth. And that is a challenge. And I think that is where our educational system in all our countries, not just China and India, but also in the US, needs to be very carefully addressed to make sure that we are training our kids going forward so that when they come out of colleges and so on, that they're better equipped to deal with the harsh reality of what the world is like. It's computerized, it's computer literate, and kids need to be very well educated. So I think there's a lot of reform that needs to take place in our educational system as well. The quality of living is going up. Even if you look at countries like India and China, or even, you go into the remote villages in India, you're finding that, villagers have cell phones now, smartphones. They're able to watch TV programs. The quality of living is going up in a lot of different ways. And I think, we need to do some very interesting things. Someone yesterday talked about microfinance and how microfinance is helping women entrepreneurs in remote villages be able to be productive and do something. So they get loans, they get microfinance loans. And one of the things that's coming out of that is that not only is microfinance happening, but with mobile banking is happening. So you got these villagers that are able now to be able to do banking on their phones. They don't have to walk 10 miles and spend half a day to go deposit money in a bank somewhere or keep it under their pillows, but they're able to do mobile banking. So it's amazing the kinds of things that technology is doing. Yes, it is creating a problem when it comes to this whole question of the computer literate and those that are not, and some of the middle income jobs and the lower income jobs are changing. They're not going away, they're changing. But at the same time, the quality of living of some of these lower income folks and middle income folks is also changing, it's increasing. And so I think technology is here to stay, it's not going away. And one of the very interesting things about innovation is the following, and that is, by and large, the innovation in the US today, by and large, it's the millennials that are creating it, right? It's not people my age. We look at it and we fund it, but more of the entrepreneurs that we're dealing with are younger folks. They're in their 20s, they're in their 30s. They're not in their 60s like I am. And so, and I think that's going to be very interesting with India and some of these other countries as well, where the demographics is changing, as you know. And, you will see more and more innovation happening because, the younger people have that innovation, they have that drive, they have that mental attitude, I can do it, and that is what creates innovation. So, anyway.
Thank you very much, Pramod. And I think I echo his sentiments directly, even for those of us who are in Singapore. Most of the people I see in my job every day who have the new ideas are all under 35. So I think there's some promise. But I think, we have some limited amount of time left, and I'd like to basically throw it open to the audience for questions, But perhaps, while you're getting yourself prepared, I'll start off with the first one, and you could address to any member of the panel. And that is to say, one of the things that is happening with this, the digital revolution that we're seeing is really creating this inequality of income between those who get it and those who actually don't. I think Pramod referred to the fact that education needs to be reformed, and I certainly believe that. What else can be done?
So let me take a stab at it. I think we need to think about how to create opportunity in addition to education. So if you educate a whole bunch of people, but they don't have these well-paying jobs that they can get after they're educated, and we are simultaneously talking about the elimination of certain kinds of jobs because they're getting automated away, we need to think about how that training is going to feed and train the workforce to be employable in the kinds of opportunities. So we have to educate, and we have to create opportunities at the same time. And these opportunities have to be relevant to the kinds of jobs that should be created in this day and age, right? So that's the nexus that we have to somehow connect.
Boon Hwee, could I try to scope the problem a bit differently? I think because technology is changing so fast, I think in the near future we're going to be confronted not just with a problem of job displacement, but with whole industries becoming sunset industries within relatively short periods of time. And so this, I think, is going to put a lot of pressure on an educational system which you see around the world, which trains people for one job for their whole life. But when you combine this with the demographic pattern of increasing life expectancy, perhaps a person might have to prepare for 2-3 different jobs, completely different jobs within his lifetime. But today you don't have an educational system that is geared up for that. And you may be trained for one job when you're in your 20s, okay. But if you're in your 30s, 40s, when you've got a family, you've got mortgages, it's a completely different prospect. So how do you, as a government, as an educational system, deliver completely different types of training, whether it's technical or university, tertiary education, frequently in a person's lifetime? I think we are not geared up for that. And I think the framing of the issue has to be changed completely.
Thank you.
My question is directed at any member of the panel. I'm trying to tie up this topic. What role will technology play in shaping Asia with what was discussed earlier this morning? And we talked of regionalism and integration in the region. So, and I have been thinking, to what extent will technology or the technological innovation, the technology innovation, determine the direction and development in the region? You talk of the knows and the know-nots, the haves and have-nots. For the countries that have technology and get it, I think they'll develop very fast. But in our region, we'll have a spread of countries, some embracing technology, much less because they don't have the resources, they haven't educated the population to that level. So in terms of regional integration, will it be much harder? That's one question. The second question, we've heard a lot talked about India, China, and the United States as the centers of innovation and where IT development is really, the revolution is going on. What happens to small countries? Are our chances of being centers of innovation as good? Or is a critical mass, population size, a factor that determines what happens? We talked of Finland in the past, being very innovative. So they had Nokia, boom, it went. And the education system now is sort of not doing as well. So I want to know, what are the small countries that also can be carried by this innovation wave? So there are two questions. One about the integration in the region, countries have not, can we all move up together? Because when you wire up a city or a country, technology gets obsolete very fast. And if you don't have the resources to replace it, how can you even move on? So.
Want to address that?
Yeah. 我觉得这个科技创新呢，这个应该是不分大国小国，特别是现在这一个开放的世界，这个信息充分的发达传播，这个教育呢是一个国家它这个创新的一个基础一个教育水平高，这个人的素质高，反应能力快，这是一个基础。但是呢，教育不会在一生中，就是你最初的教育，在以后的发展中，它不一定都起作用。最近这个互联网的发达，一些传统的行业在中国是这样，患上了一种叫互联网焦虑症， 焦虑，为什么焦虑？因为互联网改变了很多这个传统的行业，所以每个人如果你不焦虑，可能你就会被这个互联网淘汰。那么这个焦虑会使你产生一种压力，你就会去学习去创新。所以这个教育如果理解呢，它是一个不断的过程啊。那基础教育不能管一辈子啊，所以现在很多的，我刚才讲到，在中国很多的年轻人他们这个去利用互联网的机会去创新那么很多的这个行业在这个互联网的时代，它要不断的被改变命运那么这样，我觉得全社会一个是你有一定的基础，第二个你要应对这种挑战，你不断的去学习，不断的去武装自己，我觉得这样才能够实现一个不同国家的发展。
Thank you. Yeah.
You want to say?
Yeah, so what I would
Murthy?
say.
Yeah, go ahead,
Wanna
Murthy.
go first?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think we have to remember two important phenomena that will, one of which is already happening, the second one has started. The first one is globalization. I define globalization as sourcing capital from where it is cheapest, sourcing talent from where it is best available, producing where it is most cost efficient, and selling where the markets are without being constrained by national boundaries. I think it has picked up already, it is happening. I am positive that even smaller countries of Asia will become members of that. And Singapore is already there. So, the second phenomenon that is being realized in most Asian countries is the importance of education as a means to solve problems. Somehow, by and large, in most Asian countries, most countries, other than probably a few countries in the world, education by rote has been the norm. But I think many countries are now realizing the importance of children applying what they learn in the classroom to understand the real world around them, and then to ask question, can I use what I learned in the classroom to make this a better world? Given the extraordinary connectivity we have thanks to internet, thanks to mobility, thanks to social media, thanks to big data, all of that, now we are much better connected than we were 10 years ago. And as we move forward, we'll become a truly integrated global village. In other words, the problems that somebody faces in one part of the world would be very easily seen by somebody sitting in Cambodia or in Pakistan or somewhere else, even a small country. And because the children will get to that kind of education, they will then say, or children or youngsters or adults, doesn't matter, companies, they will then say, we will sort out these problems, and thereby they will create new industries. So therefore, my feeling is God is not finished with us. As long as we focus, we all accept globalization, as long as we all accept education as an instrument for solving problems in the real world, I believe there will be enough opportunity for reasonable jobs for people in small countries, big countries, doesn't matter, wherever it is.
So I'll just say a few comments. I think your comment was, how can we be centers of innovation in this region of the world, and what does it take to foster innovation? So clearly having an educated workforce or talent base is a necessary thing, but it may not be sufficient. Not all educated countries in the world are powerhouses of innovation. And I think one observation I have is innovation frequently comes from entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurship is poorly understood in most parts of the world. So we need to not just educate people on computer science and algorithms, we also need to train them on how to be entrepreneurs, right? I've learned the hard way, right? I think Pramod has witnessed some of the challenges that we have gone through over the 10-year history of the company. But frequently people don't know what is even the right thing to do to be an entrepreneur, how to build a business, what's the concept. My philosophy is you need to begin with solving big problems and big challenges, right? So I saw the challenge of cybersecurity and I said, that's a challenge, and on the flip side, it's an opportunity to build a business. Now, if you think about the developing world, there are a large number of challenges, unique challenges to this part of the world, developing and developed, and they can be addressed by local entrepreneurs if they knew how to realize the opportunity that was hidden inside that challenge, right? So entrepreneurship, building products and services to deal with the fairly large markets that are in this part of the world, and then figuring out how to finance that. The last piece might be a little challenging, but certainly getting those three things organized is, I think, critical to get innovation going in this part of the world.
Let me just add one thing on this education piece, and I think this is important. And this is, I think, where there is a tremendous opportunity for the private sector and the government sector to work together to reform the educational system. So let me explain what I mean by that. You know, if you look at the educational system in Germany, and I think there's a lot that people can learn from Germany, the trade school system is just fabulous, right? And there was a little experiment that was done in the US, and I don't know the latest status of that. But about 3 years ago, I heard this directly from Sam Palmisano, the chairman of IBM at that time, CEO of IBM at that time. He had gone to the city of New York, right there in the middle of New York, and he said, let's experiment with a new educational system. And so what they did was the following. They took graduates coming out of the 8th grades, or students coming out of the 8th grade. So as they're entering high school in the US is 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades, 4 grades. And then you have community colleges, right? Or you can have 4-year undergraduate programs. They experimented in the city of New York, and I don't remember the name of this school, this precinct there, where they said, we will set up a program which is a 6-year program. 4 years, the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, and 2 years of college, community college. So you don't get a bachelor's, but you get a sort of a trade degree. And so IBM drove that program with the city of New York, right? And what Sam told me was that when these kids graduated at the end of those 6 years, boom, they were totally, immediately sucked up by IBM. Now that's an example, right? And he told me at that point that he was getting requests from governors from 2 other states who had heard about this program saying, please come do this here in this state for us as well. Right. So see, that's where I think, first of all, I think overall we need to take a look at our educational system, right, and learn from Germany, not just the US. In fact, I would say the US is far behind when it comes to educational system. Look at what Germany has done and how they've created, trade school concepts and jobs. And then I think looking at what IBM did in the city of New York, how do you get the private sector to work with the government to create jobs, right? But also to create students that are coming out that can easily find the right kinds of jobs with the right kinds of skills and so on. So I think the private sector and the government sector has to work together.
You want to follow up? Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. Quickly.
Countries across the region at differing levels of development. And those that are ahead are those already, like Singapore, China, India, we have the technology, and
Yeah.
we have Japan, Korea.
Sure.
And those that are left behind are really left behind. And in terms of regionalism, that's much harder to try to integrate the region.
Yeah.
I thought Peter might take that up, but never mind.
No, obviously this is not an easy question, and I don't think you can find the solutions in the short term. I think a lot of the investment, if these countries want to compete, will have to go into education. But then they can also be helped. I mean, Singapore was helped in the early years through scholarship schemes like the Colombo Plan scholarship. Companies which came to invest in Singapore, like Philips, set up vocational training centers. So we can do this sort of things, but it will take time, and it also means that the governments themselves must decide that education is a priority and give a lot of focus to that. So I think there are solutions, but it will take time, and I think the governments of the countries concerned will have to decide where their priorities lie.
So we have a limited amount of time. Go ahead. Yes.
Thank you. I'm Ashar Aluwalia from Delhi, India. My question is that when we talk of what role technology will play in reshaping Asia and in improving the standards of living of people, as Mr. Haque pointed out, we have talked about the importance of education, entrepreneurship, innovation, but there is another piece which I think I didn't hear in this session, but there was a lot of emphasis on that on earlier sessions, and that was infrastructure investments in logistics. For example, when we talk of Flipkart and Snapdeal in India, ultimately it's not all about my ability to click a button and for the good to appear at my doorstep, but there has to be a whole lot of improvement in connectivity, logistics, so that somebody can bring the good to me in the shortest possible time. So I think I would just like to complete the picture. In order to answer that question, we really must emphasize the investment in transport, logistics, and all of that. Otherwise, we will be in a situation like we were 10, 15 years ago, when we all talked about the importance of policy reforms, but we did not talk about the importance of institutional reforms, so that at a higher level of growth, you will have institutions that can support the sort of growth that you are expecting. I'd like a comment from the panelists on this.
Ashar, I agree with you. One of the benefits of technology is improving the public governance system. And when you improve the public governance system, then you will get a fairer, more transparent, and more accountable system of bureaucracy and politics. And automatically, you will attract a lot more investment, both domestic and foreign. You will enhance the efficiency of completion of projects. You will reduce the cost of those projects, and thereby all these things will happen. Therefore, technology has a tremendous potential to improve the quality of public governance system. I'm very happy that Prime Minister Modi in India has started this Digital India initiative, but the reality of success of that is how well the state governments will embrace those, because as you know, we are a mixed system. We have both federal and state governments, and only when all of them embrace the system with full enthusiasm, I think we'll get the benefit. But therefore, I think there is no doubt that technology he is going to have a very, very important role in the betterment of prosperity of Asian nations.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So, but see, it comes down to supply demand, right? So I think what's happening is the Flipkarts of this world and the Snapdeals of this world, we've got a company there called Pepperfry, which is in the furniture business, but done online, right? And so what you're doing is, when companies like these get created, and when there is demand now, right, then that demand will go out and sort of create. So we have invested in a company that went public actually in Mumbai called Snowman Logistics, right? It's actually a logistics company, right? It's a public company now. We have an investment in a company called Sadbhav Engineering. It's based out of Gujarat. It's a road construction company, right? Private company, right? Building roads, right? Toll roads, right? So I think, as the demand for that kind of stuff happens, then what you'll find is the private sector will step up, right? And invest. Now, as Mr. Murthy said, one of the challenges, and I'll be, I'm not trying to offend anyone here, but one of the challenges, with investments, and this is now a Silicon Valley perspective looking out rather into India and China, is when you have bureaucracy to deal with, and when you've got the federal government and the state governments to deal with, you tear your head out at some point and you say, I don't want to deal with it, right? And so that's the issue, right? In that there's so much corruption in some of these countries, right? And in the US, we're constrained by what's called the FCPA, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, right? I can't be investing in a company, otherwise I get into trouble in the US with the US authorities, right? Or there's bribe going on in that, you can't get a permit, so that you've got to go bribe that government official. Good heavens, life is easy. Forget India and China in that sense. Now I'm just, so I think those are the things. There has to be reforms. Now, what Modi is trying to do now, cleaning up corruption, that is great, right? I hope he succeeds, and I hope he does well. And I know China is trying to do that as well. But see, I think there are certain things that have to get cleaned up. Now, at the same time, there are local investors that can invest in these companies as well, and it is happening, right? But it's really, at the end of the day, see, for investments in infrastructure to happen, or for any infrastructure or any area, at the end of the day, there has to be a return on that investment, right? Whether it's the government or whether it's the private sector, so that goes back to supply and demand. You can't build the infrastructure 20 years before the demand is there. So, the demand and the supply have to dovetail very closely together.
And I would just like to end off by saying that, the role of technology in putting some pressure even on government to do the right thing, to create better transparency is there. Let me just give you one example. In Tanzania, the average woman in the village takes 3 hours a day to collect water for the family. But almost everybody has a cellular phone. And a non-profit decided that every time the water faucet isn't working, someone would send an SMS to say this particular thing wouldn't work. Yeah. And they persuaded the national newspaper to publish a map of all the water points in Tanzania, red when it's not working, green when it's working. It started off with 80% of it being red. 1 year later, without any payment to government officials, they were all green. That's the use of technology to facilitate transparency in government. This was the idea of a non-profit, making use of technology that belongs to everybody's pockets.
We didn't answer. Could we just take 1 minute and answer this lady's question about, you said you were just talking about India and China. What about some of the other countries that are, smaller countries? And so I think what you will see happening is the following, right? And we see this in the US, and Ashar will testify that too as well. Here is FireEye. It's located right in the middle of Silicon Valley, right? But at the same time, we have an operations center and a call center in Utah, right? Which is not in Silicon Valley. It's in a part of the US, still United States of America, but it's in the part of the US where the cost of living is a little cheaper, right? And so what you'll find is that, as this region grows, right, China, India, Singapore, Thailand, and so on, what you'll find is, and as activity starts to build up here, right, what you will find is that there will be companies, and this is again, private companies have to do this to a very large extent, right? Private companies that to some extent will transcend governments and so on because they are in different parts of the area. They will, from a profitable perspective, look at it and say, okay, I've got people here, but there are certain things that I should be doing in that country because the cost of labor is a little cheaper and it'll be more profitable for me. And that is what happens, right? Which is one of the reasons why when you think about it, way back in the 2000, why did the Infosys and the Wipros and the TCSs and the Mahindra Satyams and all large IT services companies in India get created? Most of their customers, if not all, were in the US. Here's US, and the people and corporations said, hey, my call center needs to be in an area that's cost of living is a little lower, has to certain guidelines, people have to speak the language and so on and so forth, English, and therefore, so what you find is that as a region, as Asia as a region will grow and GDP will continue to grow, what you'll find is that there will be an opportunity on the part of private corporations to say that I'm going to find other areas within the region where I can take some of the the low-skill jobs, but put them in those areas so that there's employment that's created there as well.
Well, thank you all very much. I think we've certainly exceeded our time. So it just remains for me to thank the panel for an interesting discussion. I don't think we draw any conclusions out of the fact that technology is going to be here to stay with us.
Thank you very much.